So, DiJonai Carrington has responded publicly for the first time since flagrantly fouling Sophie Cunningham and then posting white privilege on Threads while tagging the Indiana Fever. The only problem is her comments don't make any sense. That's the only issue I got. They're too vague to make any sense. So she responded to a Emmanuel Acho video where he said, somebody needs to share this message to DiJonai Carrington. You can't call that foul white privilege. I can play the video for you. Here we go. Here's a.
The foul itself was impossible to ignore because it was visceral and immediate. Carrington went for the ball, but ended up striking Cunningham directly in the head with such force that blood was drawn on the court. The referees didn't even hesitate for a second before calling a flagrant 2 and tossing her from the game. It was a textbook definition of an egregious play that could have led to a serious injury for the Fever player. Everyone watching the broadcast saw it clearly, and the commentators called it out authoritatively. But instead of an apology or a cooling off period, Carrington took the conflict to a whole new level online.
To DiJonai Carrington, you can't call that foul white privilege. I can play the video for you. Here we go. Here's a piece of that video.
DiJonai Carrington made a basketball play, and the refs made a basketball ruling. So can we stick to basketball for a moment? Basketball play. She was attempting to go for the ball. At least she said so. She missed.
Arguably. I don't know. She does have, like I said, she has a history of reckless, dirty, whichever word you want to use, plays. So it makes it plausible that she was going for the ball, I guess, on that play. But given who it was on the receiving.
When the white privilege post hit Threads, the backlash was instantaneous and fierce. It felt like Carrington was trying to rewrite the rules of physics in basketball, using social politics as a shield. Critics were quick to point out that hitting someone in the face and drawing blood has nothing to do with demographics. The rules of the WNBA are supposed to be colorblind when it comes to player safety and reckless contact. By dragging race into a clear-cut officiating decision, she didn't just confuse the fans, she arguably undermined the very concept she was trying to highlight. It felt like a rhetorical weapon was being used in the wrong war.
To what DiJonai Carrington did to Sophie Cunningham, it was not a race-based decision. And to call that a white privilege-based foul is to completely undermine the term of white privilege and to also completely ignore the rules in basketball. You hit her in the head, you drew blood, you didn't connect with the ball at all whatsoever. So to me, it was just very ignorant and to some degree asinine by DiJonai Carrington to suggest that that call was based on white privilege. Have we seen examples of white players make that same foul and get away with it? Yes.
I have not. I have not.
Emmanuel Acho didn't hold back when he saw the post, and his response went viral almost immediately. He told Carrington point blank that she simply cannot call that specific foul an example of white privilege. He argued that the refs made a basketball ruling based on a basketball play that went horribly wrong. Acho's message was a plea for everyone to stick to the actual game and stop hijacking every incident for a larger social agenda. He pointed out that Carrington's history of reckless plays makes it hard to give her the benefit of the doubt. The video served as a massive wake-up call that Carrington was not expecting to receive.
Call was based on white privilege. Have we seen examples of white players make that same foul and get away with it? Yes.
I have not. I have not seen that same foul and get away with it. No.
Have we seen examples of black players make that same foul and get away with it? Yes. There was no white privilege involved in that specific call. DiJonai.
I don't know how many players have gotten away with that specific foul, regardless. That's beside the point. It's not worth getting lost in the sauce there because that is, his fundamental point is right. Like black, white doesn't matter in that application of the rule. But this is what Carrington posted after the fact.
Carrington's response to Acho was anything but a retreat. It was a sophisticated high-level clapback. She told him to try exercising his critical thinking skills and even brought up his psychology background as a jab. She claims she never actually said the assessment of the foul was based on white privilege and that everyone was just assuming her intent. This was a classic pivot that left more questions than it answered for the fans watching the drama unfold. If the post wasn't about the foul she had just committed, then what on earth was it actually referring to in that moment? The mystery only made the public outrage grow louder and more intense.
Carrington posted after the fact, "I've never once claimed that the assessment of the foul was white privilege. That was your assumption. Try exercising your critical thinking skills. I know you studied psych. Furthermore, I'm the last thing from ignorant or asinine when it comes to speaking on white privilege. Do your research on that one. I actually went to school, one of the top universities, I might add, to educate myself on this exact subject. I would never use that term as a rhetorical weapon, knowing the historical and social weight it holds without having the proper evidence to substantiate it." So, again, I mean, DiJonai has habitual.
She doubled down by highlighting her elite education, mentioning she attended one of the top universities in the country. Carrington made it clear that she has spent years studying the historical and social weight of the term white privilege. She insisted that she would never use such a heavy concept as a rhetorical weapon without having the proper evidence to back it up. But that's exactly where the logic started to crumble for the average viewer watching from home. If she has the evidence to substantiate her claim, she hasn't shared a single shred of it with the public. It felt like a lot of eloquent words used to mask a total lack of substance.
Fairly eloquent, but there's no substance. The last words are substantiated. There's no substance to what she says. I'd have two follow-up questions to this specifically. If it wasn't about the assessment of the foul, what were you saying white privilege about? Because you can't use all these words and then not explain that. You just cause more confusion. And number two, if you have the proper evidence to substantiate it, what is that evidence? What is this evidence of the white privilege that you have to substantiate because you did use it as a rhetorical weapon? And, Sophie Cunningham's explanation, which she gave.
The problem with her defense is that it creates a massive void of information that people are filling with their own theories. If you use a term as explosive as white privilege and tag your opponent's team, you owe the world an explanation. You can't just hide behind a degree and tell people to do their own research while the league is in flames. It's a move that feels more like gaslighting than it does like a genuine attempt at social education. By refusing to clarify, she ensured that the controversy would stay in the headlines for days on end. It was a masterclass in keeping the spotlight on herself, regardless of the cost.
Why would you do that, right? Like, that's, in her mind, it was intentional. She said so after the game, but why would you do that? Well, Sophie had an explanation. She said for attention. That was the explanation that Sophie gave after the game. Here's the quote. Yeah, it's intense. She has no reason to be doing any of that, right? I do think when people play the Fever, we're nationally televised. There's a lot of eyes on us, and people just want attention. And that's just her trying to get attention. And maybe that's correct and the best assessment of that. And maybe I'm, helping in her.
Sophie Cunningham had her own theory about why all of this was happening, and it was devastatingly simple. After the game, she suggested that Carrington was simply acting out because she wanted the attention. She pointed out that playing against the Indiana Fever means being on national television with millions of eyes watching your every move. According to Cunningham, some players just can't handle that level of fame and start doing things just to get noticed. It was a subtle way of saying that Carrington was clout chasing at the expense of player safety and league integrity. The Fever effect had turned a regular game into a theater for personal drama.
People are hijacking the league and we have to protect our brand. I don't think DiJonai should be the brand. She has recklessly or, dirty fouled a lot of players in the past. She has aired out things on social media quite often, stirred up, caused controversy. Again, what she said about Melissa Smith, that's their business. I'm not going to comment on it further, but it was wildly unprofessional. And there's a history of that. And I don't root against or dislike, I root against whatever, and I don't like what people say, but I don't hold any personal grudges in this case.
This isn't the first time DiJonai Carrington has been labeled a habitual line stepper by those who follow the league closely. There is a documented history of her making plays that many consider to be dirty or unnecessarily reckless. Whether it is her physical intensity on the court or her inflammatory comments on social media, she seems to enjoy the friction. Some fans argue that she is exactly what the league needs, a villain who isn't afraid to speak her mind. But others see it as a self-destructive pattern that is eventually going to lead to a massive fallout. The line between being a fierce competitor and a professional liability is getting thinner. The incident with Nalissa Smith is another example of Carrington airing out private business in a wildly unprofessional way. She has a tendency to stir up controversy on social media and then act surprised when people react to the mess she made. This pattern of behavior suggests that the white privilege post wasn't an isolated incident of social activism. Instead, it looks like part of a larger strategy to keep her name in the conversation at all costs. When you combine dirty fouls with racial accusations, you are playing a very dangerous game with your professional reputation. It is a path that rarely ends well for athletes who want to be taken seriously. Caitlin Clark's presence in the league has changed the stakes for everyone involved, especially when it comes to the Fever. Every foul, every tweet, and every look is being analyzed by a massive new audience that didn't exist a year ago. Carrington seems to be leaning into this new reality by positioning herself as the ultimate antagonist to the Fever's rising stars. But by using terms like white privilege in such a vague and confusing way, she might be alienating the very people she wants to influence. You can't lead a social movement if nobody knows what you are actually talking about or why you're angry. It looks more like a personal vendetta than a systemic critique. The referees in the WNBA are already under a microscope, and Carrington's post only added to the immense pressure they face. By implying that their decisions are fueled by racial bias, she is calling the entire integrity of the game into question. If a flagrant 2 foul for a hit to the head is considered white privilege, then the rule book basically becomes meaningless. Players need to know that they will be protected from dangerous contact regardless of who is committing the foul. Carrington's rhetoric threatens to dismantle the standard of safety that the league has worked so hard to establish. It's a heavy price to pay for a few viral moments on social media. Many veteran observers of the league are calling for an intervention before things spiral out of control for Carrington. They see a talented player who is actively sabotaging her own career in a desperate quest for relevance. The WNBA is at a turning point where its brand is finally going mainstream, and players like Carrington are the face of it. If the brand becomes synonymous with petty drama and unfounded accusations, it could hurt the league's growth in the long run. There is a fine line between being a personality and being a distraction that the league eventually has to distance itself from. The clock is ticking on her ability to turn this around. The backlash isn't just coming from fans of the Indiana Fever, it is coming from people who value the truth in sports. Basketball is a game of facts, scores, and clear-cut fouls that are caught on high-definition cameras from 10 different angles. You can't hide a hit to the head, and you can't pretend blood didn't spill on the hardwood floor. When Carrington tries to layer a complex social theory over a simple physical act, she loses the locker room and the fans. People are tired of the constant gaslighting and the refusal to take accountability for actions on the court. It is time for the game to be about the game again. Sophie Cunningham's attention comment seems to be the most accurate assessment of the situation we have so far. It explains the timing, the platform, and the intentional vagueness of the entire ordeal. Carrington knew that by tagging the Fever and using a hot-button phrase, she would dominate the news cycle for at least 48 hours. She chose to be the main character of the WNBA for a weekend, even if it meant being the villain in everyone else's story. This level of self-centeredness is a dangerous trait in a team sport where chemistry and reputation are everything. She is playing for herself while everyone else is playing for the win. The silence from the rest of the league's stars on this specific issue is also quite telling. While many players support social justice causes, very few have come to Carrington's defense regarding this particular post. It is almost as if they realize that her logic is flawed and that getting involved would only hurt their own brands. Carrington is standing on an island of her own making, surrounded by her own words and a degree she keeps citing as armor. But an education from a top university doesn't give you a pass to act unprofessionally or avoid explaining your public statements. Real critical thinking requires being able to defend your positions with more than just insults. The irony of the situation is that by calling out privilege, Carrington is acting with a level of entitlement that few other players would dare. She seems to believe she can say whatever she wants, whenever she wants, without any regard for the consequences or the facts. She expects the world to just take her word for it because she did the research at a prestigious school. That is not how the real world works, and it is certainly not how professional sports work. You are judged by your actions and the clarity of your message, not by the diplomas on your wall. She is learning this lesson the hard way as the public turns against her narrative. As the WNBA continues to grow, the league office is going to have to take a much harder look at how players use social media. There is a difference between having a voice and using that voice to spread confusion and division within the fan base. Carrington's behavior is testing the limits of what the league is willing to tolerate in the name of player expression. If they allow players to baselessly accuse officials of racial bias every time they get a flagrant foul, the league will descend into chaos. A standard needs to be set before this becomes the new normal for every game that doesn't go a certain player's way. Caitlin Clark and the Fever have become the ultimate targets for this kind of behavior because they represent the new era of the league. They bring the crowds, the money, and the national attention that everyone else wants a piece of. Carrington is clearly trying to capitalize on that energy, but she is doing it in a way that feels desperate and unearned. Instead of outplaying the Fever on the court, she is trying to outmaneuver them in the court of public opinion. But as we have seen, the fans are smarter than she gives them credit for. They can tell the difference between a genuine social issue and a tactical distraction. The evidence she claims to have remains a total mystery to everyone but her. If there is a massive conspiracy of white privilege within the WNBA's officiating, she would be doing the league a favor by exposing it. But by sitting on this supposed evidence while using the term as a weapon, she is just blowing smoke. It is a classic move of someone who has lost the argument but wants to maintain a position of moral superiority. The fans are tired of the riddles and the do your research tropes. They want accountability, they want clarity, and most of all, they want to see basketball played without the side of manufactured drama. In the end, DiJonai Carrington is at a crossroads that will define the rest of her career in the WNBA. She can continue down this path of being a habitual line stepper who uses social media to burn bridges and stir up trouble. Or she can take a step back, look at the impact of her words, and realize that being a professional requires more than just talent. The league is moving forward with or without her, and the new audience isn't interested in confusing puzzles about privilege. They want to see the best athletes in the world compete at the highest level with integrity. If she can't provide that, she might find herself on the outside looking in.